Well, welcome back to Avert Alzheimer's. I am super excited to have my business partner and close friend and fasting coach. Yep, that's all one person, all rolled up into one on this podcast with me. Next week, I am doing a free 72-hour fast with a group of people. And if you listen to this and it's something you think you'd be interested in doing, I highly encourage you to let me know. But Brianne is with me today. She is the co-founder of Flexible Fasting. She and her husband own that company, and I met them at a business mastermind, or I met her there and later met her husband, and they have just become this plethora of facts and figures and information for me in my fasting journey. And fasting goes well with Alzheimer's prevention, so it's just a marriage made in heaven. Anyway, I want to let Brianne tell you a little bit about her and her fasting journey, and then we will move into the actual interview. So, hi, Brianne.
Hey, I'm
Welcome.
happy to be here
I am so happy to have
excited
you.
to talk about fasting.
Yay.
Yeah, I think everyone needs fasting in their life, obviously, because that's what we're that's what we're
Yes.
doing with our lives, teaching people how to fast, because it's just so underutilized today. And a little bit about me. I'm an RN, and I started my fasting journey, I'm trying to think, 3 or 4 years ago now, not sure which. But I found fasting because my dad had cancer, and they were looking to alternative treatments because they didn't really have any other options for him. And so my mom was doing tons of research, obviously, and found fasting and sent me some information on it. And I was just like, holy smokes, how come we did not know any of this before? Like, this is incredible. Fasting is not starving yourself. It's the way God designed you to live life, feasting and fasting. And we've been doing it ever since. We lost all the weight that we've been trying to lose for 10 years. I lost 30 pounds. My husband lost 70 pounds. And so that's a whole person between us, which is crazy. But also through fasting and prayer, my dad is now cancer free. So an incredible miracle. And yeah, God has been so good. And it has been honestly one of the most amazing things. Like, fasting literally saved our lives and has just taken our relationship with God to the next level, and it's been incredible. So I am excited to share with you everything that I can in this podcast. So
Okay, let's do this. Well, so because I'm doing the 72-hour fast next week with a group of ladies, I wanted to really touch more on extended fasting. I do want to talk briefly about intermittent fasting just because, and I know I didn't put this in the notes, but intermittent fasting is such a buzzword right now. I kind of want you to just touch on it for a minute and talk about I guess without going into too terribly much detail, because the extended fast is what I'm more geared toward in this particular podcast, but I believe that it's probably done wrong a lot. And I'd like to hear your quick take on that.
Yeah, so intermittent fasting, a lot of people will say like, oh, I tried that and it didn't work. And that is usually because they tried very strict eating windows for very specific amounts of time. And I would say intermittent fasting is usually more time restricted eating than it is true fasting. And that's easy to plateau when you have so many restrictions. It's hard to maintain, and it just does not, I don't know, doesn't work well with everyday life. And if you're eating like so much food that you normally would in a day, just in a shorter window, it's not necessarily going to give you the same results. You're going to gain health benefits, but it's not going to give you the same weight loss results that you're looking for, because those shorter fasting times can plateau much quicker. So really being flexible with your eating hours and learning how to incorporate fasting in your everyday life is a much better tool in the long run for people to use. And that's what we found with almost everyone who has tried intermittent fasting before, is that they were trying to do exactly what someone else did. And we're also different, that is just not sustainable for life. Is doing what worked for someone else may not necessarily work for you. And so we really train people on the scientific aspects, the practical application, and really incorporating that into your life so that it can be something that you do daily, weekly, monthly, and making it work for you.
Okay. So as somebody who studies brain health and Alzheimer's prevention, I do know that 14 hours a day is kind of the pivotal point for brain health. However, I've also learned that taking a break on the weekends is actually a good idea if you're fasting every day. Would you agree with that, with the research you and Sam have done?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like
Okay.
you don't want to be fasting all day every single day. I think it's good to take breaks and give your body time to recover, feast, rest, those types of things, and then go back into the fasting. I think it's great. There are some people who do a 24-hour fast and eat once a day their whole lives, and they do great with that, and they love it, and that's just how they grew up, or that's how they learned to eat, or that's how they're currently eating, and it really works for them, which is great. But not everyone is like that, and that's okay. So I think taking breaks on the weekend just for your own mental health and spending time with friends and family, like God created feasting and fasting for a reason. And I think it's okay to live in those moments in the ebb and flow of life, really, in the mountains and the valleys. It's a good thing.
Yes. Oh, one thing I didn't mention, I said you were my business partner, but I didn't even say what the business is. Brianne and
Oh
I,
yeah.
with two other ladies, Julie Spears and Sherry Johnson, we all co-founded the Christian Women's Health Collective. So you're going to hear her talk a lot about God. If you've noticed, I talk a lot about God. There's a reason for that, because we are very God-centered in our businesses. And now we have a very God-centered business together. Okay, so moving on, I want to talk about extended fasting. Most of the people who are going to be doing this extended fast with me next week are first-time fasters. So a lot of them are probably not even intermittent fasting right now. They just kind of want to see what the health benefits are for doing an extended fast, because I've posted so much about my own journey with the fasts that I've done since I met you. So let's just talk about that really quickly. And what I'd like to know is what your top 3 recommendations would be for preparing for a fast like this, especially for someone who's never done real fasting.
Okay, so a couple of things. Number one is reducing your sugar intake before you start a long fast, because sugar increases your hunger hormones, you have more cravings, and it's harder to go into ketosis, which is what happens when you're fasting. And so eliminating the sugars makes it easier to fast. So if you eliminate sugars and you eliminate snacking between meals, you're doing yourself a huge favor and setting yourself up for success. So only eating at actual meal times and eating real food, not processed sugary food, is going to make you feel so much better. You're going to feel it's going to be a lot easier to fast, especially if it seems impossible. Like, you want to do everything you can ahead of time to feel better when you start fasting, right? So 100% want to eliminate as much sugar as you can, as much processed food as you can, and snacking between meals, so that you are starting to do a form of fasting, right? You're not eating constantly. You're letting your body go a little longer, which is good preparatory work, because fasting is like a muscle. The more you do it, the easier it gets.
I love
the
that.
next thing that I would say is that basically we tell people to gather your fasting fuels. Whatever you're going to be using as your fasting fuels, your drinks, your waters, your nuts, your olives, whatever you're going to be using as your fasting fuels, make sure that you have all those on hand in the house, because you're not going to want to go to the grocery store or the convenience store or whatever while you're fasting, because it's hard. I'm not going to lie. Like, you don't want to go into the grocery store and have to shop when you're feeling hungry.
Okay, but what are fasting fuels?
Okay, so fasting fuels are things that you can have while you're fasting that will not break your fast. And I would say the number one fasting fuel that you need, especially for your first time fasting, is whatever caffeine you normally drink in a day. You need to be having that same amount, because otherwise you're going to be dealing with caffeine withdrawal headaches, which is really terrible when you're already trying to fast. So if you drink coffee, tea, those are probably really the only fasting fuels that you can have that have caffeine in them. So find one that you like and that you can still drink while you're fasting. The other thing is sea salt or pink Himalayan salt. You need a whole salt, because you need to be drinking salt every day while you're fasting, especially if it's your first fast, because it really helps maintain the hydration level in your body, and so you don't deal with as many symptoms. So I usually do a teaspoon, half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of sea salt in a little cup of water. I just take it like a shot in the morning, and then before I go to bed at night. And that really derails all of the headaches and a lot of the like fluid type icky like symptoms.
Okay.
So sea salt, obviously clean water, tea or coffee, if that's what you prefer. And then you can also do a very tiny amount of fats while you're fasting, because that will not raise your blood sugar at all. So it will not, or your insulin levels, either one. So it will not technically break your fast. At flexible fasting, we talk about fasting like you still get the great results even if you don't do it perfectly. And research has proven that. So if you need to have a little bit of cream in your coffee so you can still have that while you're fasting, you can do that. That is okay. If you want to have like 2 or 3 olives or 2 or 3 nuts, we usually say as a rule, keep it under 50 calories and only use it when absolutely necessary. If you're having a really intense hunger spike and you think I cannot keep fasting, try that first. Drink a ton of water, have some salt water. Then 15, 20, 30 minutes later, you can decide if you really still want to break your fast or if you're fine now.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, is that we really promote listening to your body. So if you feel like you can't continue fasting, you should stop fasting. You're in control the entire time. So you do not have to keep fasting if you do not feel well. You know,
Yeah.
like there are things you can try. So definitely do that if you want to keep going. But if you don't feel well, just stop fasting.
Yeah.
You know, and try again later. You will, the more you fast, the more you practice your fasting muscles, the easier it will get and the longer you'll be able to go fasting.
Yeah. So my first time doing a long fast, I did 96, 92 hours. And I started my fast after eating a ridiculous amount of carbs the day before because, you know, I have an addictive personality and I was like, oh, must gorge before fasting because I'm not going to eat for 4 days, which was the stupidest thing I could have done. Then I tried to fast for 4 days, I've been intermittent fasting for years, but I'd never really done anything past 24 hours before. And I tried to do the super long fast, and I didn't know anything really about fasting fuels at the time. I just met you shortly after you and your family came up to Alaska. And so I hadn't dove in yet to really understand it. And I wasn't asking you enough questions, obviously, because 4 days in, I was trying to do a 14-day fast, by the way. 4 days in, I was super lightheaded, totally losing my gourd. Cut caffeine too, decided I wanted to do a full water fast. Craziest thing I could have done. I ended up having to take a half day off of work because the headaches were so bad. What else? So complete water fast, no caffeine, didn't think to take charcoal. So I've got all these toxins running into my body, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then, yeah, I couldn't focus at work. The brain fog was so bad. And ideally, you know, we're supposed to have more energy and less brain fog and more clarity, but it has to be done properly, which is why I wanted you on the show. So I am super grateful for that. The last time I did my fast, I did 100 hours. I made it to the 100 hours, but the last 24 hours, I was like ravenous. I was eating fasting fuels every hour because I just was so hungry. So I love that you guys, you know, push flexibility. I love that you push listen to your body. And I did. I mean, I made it to that 100 hours because I didn't feel like I was putting my body in any jeopardy, but it can be really hard, and support is huge. It's huge, which is why I wanted to do a group fast. So I can't get my husband to do past 48 hours. So a group of women doing it with me is going to be super fun.
Super fun. And you know what I forgot to mention earlier, one of the most important things that you need to do while you're fasting in order for it to be safe, and fasting has been proven safe for hundreds of years, but most of the research is take a multivitamin while you're fasting. So take a multivitamin every day while you are fasting, whether you're doing 24 hours, 72 hours, whatever it is, just take a multivitamin every day because that's what's been proven safe.
Okay. So now you know, take a multivitamin every day.
Yes. So include that in your fasting fuels. You need a multivitamin every day.
And just take it with it because I didn't put it in my prep kit that I sent out.
Yes. So just drink it with lots of water, and usually, and if you have daily medications that you take, also just take those with a lot of water, especially if it says take it with food. If you drink plenty of water with it, usually you'll be just fine, or you can try one of the fasting fuels with your daily medications.
And
That's one
that's
of
what I
the
was going to ask you, because I
common
do
questions.
have a girl that's interested, but she is on a medication that says take with food.
Yeah,
So,
we get that question a ton. And if you
okay.
drink enough water with it, it should not upset your stomach.
Okay.
And you drink lots of water anyways. So take it with some salt water. And if you're worried about it, you know, have a couple of nuts with it or something whenever you take it in the morning, and you should be just fine.
Okay, perfect. So who shouldn't fast?
Okay, this is a good question. Basically, fasting is proven safe for most everybody, and it's beneficial for just about every kind of health condition out there as far as the research that we've seen. However, there are some caveats to that. Pregnant women should not be fasting. Children should not be fasting.
Yeah.
Breastfeeding women, it's optional because it can decrease your milk supply. So all the research out there on pregnant, breastfeeding, and children, as far as fasting goes, none of them go past 24 hours.
Okay.
So we know that it is safe for all of those 3 groups to fast up to 24 hours, but there is not research beyond that, and there won't ever be, because they're not going to put anyone's, you know, health in jeopardy, children or pregnant women. So we just recommend sticking to 24 hours or less fasting. Okay.
Good enough. And what else? Okay. So as I've already mentioned, both of us are Christian women, and we love to incorporate prayer into our fasting. So I want just to touch on that briefly, because I know that there are some Christian women who are involved in this group coming up. And I want, just because I know what's going on with your flexible fasting business, let's talk a little bit about fasting and prayer.
Yeah. So this is one of the huge, like, I don't know, unused tools in our tool belt as a Christian, right? Because we're grew up with so much misconceptions around fasting. But fasting is perfectly safe. And especially if you're fasting and praying, right? Because God sustains us with his presence. And so that is really the biggest thing. And this is hard to put into words. Like, when you're fasting and praying, you are humbling yourself before God. And that is so it's like a form of worship for God, right? Like he is so pleased with us when we are like, hey, I want more of you than I want food. Like that is ministering to his heart, to the heart of God, right? Mm-hmm. And it's also ministering to our hearts, because we're like, hey, I want more of you than I want food. And God honors that. He honors that with all of the health benefits we get with fasting, and he honors that with his presence. And it's been incredible how much more of God we see in our lives, how much more he speaks to us when we give him that opportunity. And so I encourage you to give him that opportunity to speak to you. Dedicate your time of fasting with prayer. And here's the other thing. Fasting is a spiritual practice. You do not have to pray with your fasting. When you are fasting, God sees, he sees your suffering, and he knows why you're fasting, right? And so we can come before God just with fasting. And when you incorporate fasting and prayer, it's like, I always like to say, it's like, imagine these huge doors to God's throne room, right? Like the ginormous, like, doors, like big wooden doors, right? That you would have to have like 10 men to open and close, right? And most of the time when we pray, we're opening the little door at the bottom. Like, you know, we're opening the little door to go into God's throne room, right? But when you're fasting and praying, those huge doors get blown wide open, and you are in the presence of God, and he hears you and sees you. And it's like the persistent widow, right? The more we bring our requests to God, he's going to be like, okay, I hear you, I see you. Like, it's more moving of heaven and earth, you know? And just honoring God with fasting is bringing more of his presence into our lives and into the world around us. So yeah, fasting and prayer is huge. And I strongly encourage everyone who has never fasted and prayed before to get on your knees and ask God, hey, what type of fasting and prayer should I do? Because there are all kinds of fasting.
I love it. I got chills. I love the door analogy. That was amazing. All right. I think someone's stuck in the snow outside my house.
Oh Oh,
before we close, one final thing that I wanted to ask you about is, can you just give me the top 3 health benefits that a 72-hour fast is going to give these ladies?
yeah. Okay, so, oh gosh, what should I pick? There's so
I
many
know,
good
right?
ones.
I completely forgot to put this on your agenda. I'm so sorry.
Oh man, no, it's okay. Gotta think off the top of my head. Like, okay, I think one of my most favorite things is the autophagy. I'm gonna say is number one because by the time you get to 72 hours, your autophagy is increased like 200% or something crazy. And that means that your body is recycling old cells, which is why fasting is beneficial for cancer. It
Yes.
decreases inflammation, it balances your hormones, it improves your immune system, which all contribute to lowering your risk of cancer.
And
One,
Alzheimer's.
and Alzheimer's, yes, because you're renewing the cells not only in your whole body, but also in your brain. Like, so the
Mhm.
autophagy is a huge thing. That is like one of my most favorite things. And it's also reverse aging. It improves the aging process for you as you age, which is just like, wow, thank you, God. Like, that's amazing. You know, fasting really the real fountain of youth, right?
Just a little tip. She's got 2 grown children and still gets carded.
That's true. I do. Um, Next thing would probably be human growth hormone is boosted like exponentially. And so your muscle mass is preserved. And when human growth hormone is promoted, then you're able to build muscle. Like it increases your ability to build muscle. So if you like to exercise and weightlift, which I do, then you're getting huge benefits if you're fasting sometime during that process, right? So that is huge. Probably the third thing, oh, I don't know. I'm gonna say it's the brain power, the hyper focus that you get, and just the joy because your brain hormones are reset. Like all of those things that affect your brain, fasting not only detoxes your body but also your brain. And so the joy and happiness that you feel after fasting more than 24 hours is incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Even when you think you're miserable, you still have this elation from
Yes.
fasting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It gives a complete brain reset. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think you can be depressed if you've been fasting.
Yeah. There's quite a serotonin boost from it. I'll agree.
Yes, it is. It's huge. It's amazing.
Oh my gosh. I'm so grateful that you came on this podcast and that you are giving so much wisdom. So the last thing is for you to tell everyone how they can work with you, because I am not a fasting coach. I'm a brain health coach and you're my fasting coach. So share all your places to be found, please.
Sure. We are on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We have a podcast and you can find us at flexible-fasting.com.
I'll put a link
And
below.
we have a membership. We have some free opt-ins and help for people who want to do their first 24-hour fast. It's completely free. So you can go check that out too.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. All right. We'll see you next time. Bye.